It is awesome to have you here this evening. Thank you for coming out on this cold and wet evening throughout Westfield Auditorium. I would like to introduce you, Robbie from the Attitude Group. He has come all the way from out south, and he's been with us all day today, and will be again with our Year 7s all day tomorrow. Had some awesome workshops so far, but we're really honoured, I suppose, to have such an awesome attitude. Well, Robbie, you're awesome, but to have an awesome group of people coming into our school and helping to, I suppose, usher or support our young people in this new transition that they're going through in their lives. It's quite a challenging time. I'm sure you guys can attest to that as well, but it's definitely awesome to have some people come in and help us understand it as teachers, as learners, but also as whānau. So can we please have a big round of applause for
Is it good? Yeah, there we go. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. Look, I realise that this seems somewhat unnecessary using the microphone. However, we are recording this session for people that weren't brave enough to come out tonight. That's right, I'm talking to you. So the microphone on the camera isn't very good at picking up the sound. So that's why we're using this. But welcome to our behind the screens presentation. As you just heard, my name is Robbie, and I work for an organisation called Attitude. Potentially, I am the reason that you had some awkward conversations with your young people when they came home this afternoon. We've been talking about puberty all day. Sorry. Hopefully they aren't too awkward. However, I did encourage them to have some uncomfortable conversations. So I'm sorry if you have had to bear the brunt of that, asking about periods and erections. But thankfully, that's not what we're talking about tonight. But, well, actually, I mean, who knows? Who knows where the evening will go? But this is a presentation that has become infinitely more valuable, but also more wanted in our communities as we've gone through this crazy stage with COVID. Our lives have become so technologically reliant, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of actually catching up with what our young people have found as normal to begin with. However, before I jump into that, let me introduce myself properly, because I'm sure plenty of you are looking at me right now and thinking, what parenting advice could I get from a millennial? And I get it, there's a whole lot that you could have been doing with your evening. You could have been, I don't know, watching The Block or something. But instead you've come here to talk with me. I'm not as far along the parenting journey as you are. I have two little boys. My oldest boy is Abel. He's 3 years old, and I don't know if this is normal, but this is what I face on a daily basis.
Did he got you a
Orange.
orange? And what colour is the orange?
Yellow.
Someone tell me that's normal, please. Please, because at the moment my only parenting skill is drinking coffee, and I have no idea what I'm doing. My youngest boy, he was the first one in my family to catch COVID. No one was surprised. This is why. He eats everything, and again, I don't know if that is normal or not, but his name is Teddy, he's a year old. And look, even though I am early in on this parenting game, I have been working with young people. I've been a youth worker for just over a decade now. I worked in my local high school and intermediate in my hometown of Nelson for just over 6 years, and for the last 5 years, I have been working with this amazing group of people, Attitude. We travel all over Aotearoa. We do a whole bunch of different health talks. We deliver presentations from Year 7 all the way to Year 13 on a variety of different topics, everything from making friends, technology, puberty, all the way to drugs and alcohol, sex, mental health for the high schoolers. We speak on average to about 300,000 students a year, so it's very busy. This is my full-time job, but normally my job looks like, well, last period today, I had all of your children filled in this room. At the end of the day, it was hot, it was sweaty, it was smelly, so this is far more enjoyable. This is great, but it's a pleasure to be in a room, in a context where, and I'm sure that actually the teachers at the school will agree with me, as much as we find great joy and value inputting into the lives of your young people, one of the greatest frustrations is all the young people that we invest into who then go home to situations that don't end up with that same level of investment. And the fact that you're here tonight, well done. It proves that you care about your young people, you care about their future, you care about what it is that they're currently going through, you want to be able to upskill. And despite what you hear on the media, despite what you hear in the news, after travelling around most of this country and speaking from one school context to another, I've got to say, I think that things are far more positive than you'd be led to believe, and that the young people of this country, despite what you may have experienced yourself, are actually some incredible young people that are doing some amazing things that think of the world in ways that we never did when we were young people, and I think they will go on to be incredibly productive members of society. But with that being said, we are here to talk about a part of their world which is incredibly normal for them, but it's something that isn't so normal for us. And I thought it was only fitting that seeing as we were in a school to have this chat, I would start with a quiz just to see how on board you are with your young person's world. This presentation is going to be split into 3 different areas. We're going to talk about the world of your young people, we're going to talk about their brain, and then we're also going to talk about the technology that they use. But if we start off with a quiz, if you know the answer, just shout it out. But not the lads at the back in the sound booth, because you will know this. Question number 1, what does CAP mean? Any ideas?
Cool.
So the first one was right, lies. It's not that sort of CAP. A CAP is a response of negative disbelief or suspicion. So if you say, oh, I bought these for $1.99 and your child says CAP, then that means that they don't believe you. No CAP is the opposite, where they think it's awesome. Yeah, I don't know who came up with this. The word lit, does anyone know what this means? Yeah, it's awesome. It's something which is amazing. It's cool. I shouldn't need to say this, but please don't go home and start using these words. Your young person will not want to talk to you. What does the following acronym mean? Greatest of all time. This is actually a basketball term, so if you get called a GOAT, this is high praise for your young person. However, not to be confused with old GOAT, okay? Not the same thing. Greatest of all time. SMH? Shake my head. Look, you could write a massive text to your young person about how disappointed you are that they've left their lunch on the bench for the 3rd time this week, or you can take a photo of it, send it to them on Messenger with SMH, shake my head, and they will feel it. They will feel it in their soul. Yeah, so, okay, IJNTU? I just made that up, that doesn't sound very the following emojis? Yeah, kind of, yeah. So the emoji is dead, however, it is a much shortened version of I'm dying laughing. So yeah, again, a positive thing, unless it's in the context of grandma. I don't know. This one here? Crying with laughter. Yeah, this was actually the Oxford Word of the Year in 2011. Now I can see some of you looking disappointed, like, oh, our language has regressed so much that we're back to hieroglyphics. However, if you were to have a chat with linguists, they reckon that this is emojis is the fastest jump forwards in the progression of language that we've seen in hundreds of years. Because, 1, it's a universal language. It's the same all over the world. But 2, for the first time, assuming that you know how emojis work, your young people, they are able to communicate not only what they are thinking, but how they are feeling, faster and more accurately than they've ever been able to do before. However, you have to understand what it means, because otherwise you've got no idea why your young person has sent you the emoji of trousers. I can only assume that means that they're wearing pants, but also I don't know what else you would use that for. How do you pronounce this word? Oh, thank you. Please do not say Mimi ever, okay? Your young person will not look at you the same way. A meme is a picture joke. Often the picture has absolutely no reference to what the actual joke is. For example, this is a meme using Winnie the Pooh, but talking about how mums don't understand memes. I'm not gonna lie, most of the memes that your young person shows you probably isn't funny. However, if you go, great, they'll love it, alright? Don't ask if you know this person, who is this person, where do you know them? They don't. Okay, what percentage of young people speak more online than in real life? You want to chuck up your hand for 27%? 37%? 75%? 87%? Oh, you have little faith. The answer is 75%. I will put a caveat on this though, that I don't know if this is the amount of conversations that your young person has or the actual depth of the conversation had, because I think it's probably safe to assume that your young person can communicate with 4 or 5 different people at once. using Messenger, but it's probably not to the same depth of which you sit down at the table and have a chat. I honestly don't know if it's both or neither, however, that's what the most recent stats say. How many hours of media consumption does the average young person fit into 7 hours? Chuck your hand up for 3? For 5? For 7? For 10? Again, just the answer is a 10. And no, your young person hasn't worked out how to bend the space-time continuum. It is completely normal for your young person to be sitting on the couch, watching TV, on their phone, with the laptop open, listening to music, all at the same time. They're actually incredibly good at multitasking. It's just never the tasks that you want them to be good at. And so it makes sense that one of the greatest challenges that we have with our young people at the moment is overstimulation. Because they really are being bombarded by literally every single sensory experience that you can think of, and often it doesn't stop. All of this to say that the world that our young people are growing up in, it's very different from the world that we grow up in. However, I personally believe, and the premise for this whole talk, I guess, would be that while technology has given us cool things, it hasn't actually given us anything new. It's just given us new ways of doing things that we've always done. Your young people have always been distracted, played games, had friends, been bullied, and technology just gives them a new way to experience that. And that also means that the problems that you face, while they may seem like they are new problems, you'll be the first parents ever to ask the question, when is the right time for my child to have a device? When is the right time for them to have access to social media? How long should they be in front of the TV after school when they spent half of their day in front of devices at school? The truth is that even though it seems like it's new problems, actually the good news is that the resolution to those problems are actually the same solutions that we've always had. It's just being able to tweak and recontextualize what we're currently doing so that we can fit into this world. I personally find it really interesting because I've grown up in a world where I remember what it was like not to have high-speed internet. I remember the pain of watching a video on YouTube and someone would ring their house and all of a sudden the internet would die. I remember how terrifying it was to call your friend in the weekend and have their parents answer the phone instead of them. Our young people don't even... Okay. How would you mime answering the phone? Out of curiosity, how would you mime answering the phone? Your young people mime answering the phone like this. The context of hanging up the phone, I don't even know where they get that from because they don't hang up the phone anymore. There are so many things that are so different in their world today. However, I was also part of the generation where I was in high school when Facebook released. I was in high school when the first smartphone came out, and so my generation has been the generation that's really run with this technology. But being able to have a foot in each world and observe the good things but also the bad things, I've personally found really interesting. And so what I want to be able to do is make some observations about your young person. But firstly, here's a really famous quote. The children now love luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, they show disrespect for elders, love talking in place of hard work. Children are now tyrants, they don't know their place in the family, they don't show respect to their elders, they contradict their parents, talk over the top of adults, gobble up their food at the table and tyrannize their teachers. Does anyone know who said that? Socrates. Nothing is new under the sun, and the problems that we have with our young people are the same as they have always been. And so even though it looks like a new world, understanding the way that they interact with what is essentially the same old is really important. And one of the biggest challenges that you're all facing right now is that your young people, they're going through puberty. It's one of the reasons that we're talking about it right now. And as they go through puberty, your young person is going through potentially more brain development than almost any other time of their life. The last time they went through this much brain development, they were about 2-3 years old. And if you can remember what your child was like at 2-3 years old, I'm right in the middle of it, they are emotional monsters. Your sweet little children, they disappear, and all of a sudden it's thrashing feet in the supermarket aisles and refusing to eat dinner, and your young person is acting quite similar to those tantrums because at the moment their prefrontal cortex is currently being developed. And the way that our brain works is while our brain is developing, it shuts down that area for renovations. So at the moment, your child's prefrontal cortex basically isn't doing a lot. One day it'll be back up to snuff, but until then, all of these things aren't working. Risk assessment, memory and impulse control, decision making, planning, reasoning, sound familiar? This is why your young person can leave a banana in their bag for 3 weeks straight, even though you've told them to take it out every single afternoon and it's still there. The problem is, you look at your young person and you think, why on earth would you think that that was a smart thing to do? And it wasn't a smart thing to do. However, their brain literally isn't functioning properly. And when we look at their actions through the lens of our fully functioning adult brain, it can be really hard to understand why they did that immensely stupid thing. Have a little exercise, cast your mind back. When was the last time you asked yourself, what could possibly go wrong? And you couldn't think of anything. That's how some of us got married. But look, at the end of the day, this is what your young person's reality is every single day. They think what could possibly go wrong, and the answer is nothing. With the year 10, so a little bit older on, we do our drug and alcohol presentation, and we run them through a little risk assessment exercise. Where we say, imagine that there's a party island that's got jet skis and your favourite musicians and free food, and it's going to be incredible, but the only way that you can get there is by jumping on a boat and sailing across this island, and there's super realistic sharks. Who would feel comfortable getting in a helicopter and flying across? And 80% of the students will put their hand up. Some people are afraid of heights, so then we'll go to who would feel comfortable jumping on a yacht and sailing across? 60%. Who would feel comfortable getting in a kayak and paddling across? 40%. Who would want to jump on a paddleboard and balance? There's still people that are like, yup. And then we say, okay, who would be keen on swimming? But we're going to tie chicken nuggets to your ankles. And there's a solid 20%. Probably all boys who are like, yup, I'm keen, right? Our young people, they genuinely, they don't think clearly. And knowing this, knowing the limitations of the adolescent brain, it does not excuse bad behaviour. It does, however, reinforce the need for parents to provide persistent support and guidance. More than ever, adolescents need their parents to be an integral part of their lives. It's not butting in, it's pouring in your love and guidance to protect their future hope, health, and happiness. In 1972, Dr. Roger Hart, he performed a really interesting experiment. So he went to this tiny town in the States, and he went to a local school, and he followed around all of the kids at this, he got permission, but he followed around all of these kids from the school, and he mapped out the geography of their lives. He found out where they went to the ice cream bar after school, found out how many of them played sport. He'd say, hey, take me somewhere that your parents don't want you to ever go. And they'd jump on their bikes and they'd bike across town to the old sawmill, and they'd say, we can't go here, our parents would be furious if we went inside. But hey, take me somewhere that's dangerous. They'd jump on their bikes, they'd bike to the other side of town, they'd go to the old quarry. They'd be like, we can't go in here, our parents would kill us if they knew that we were here. He mapped out what their lives looked like. And then, in 2004, he went back to the same town and did the exact same experiment with the kids of those kids. And what he found was fascinating. He found that at school, things were very similar. However, when they went back home, he'd ask these kids these questions, where's somewhere that isn't safe? And rather than getting on their bikes and biking to the other end of town, they would walk to the end of their driveway, point at the street and say, we can't go there, that's not safe. He'd say, take me somewhere that's dangerous, and almost all the kids would walk into their bathroom, point at the medicine cabinet and say, we can't open that, that's dangerous. And in an effort to protect our kids, and cotton wool them, or bubble wrap them, or however you want to explain it, in an effort to keep our children safe, we've shrunk their physical geography. However, their lives actually haven't got smaller. It's just expanded in other areas. And because we're still playing a catch-up game when it comes to the digital world, young people, their lives have blossomed into the digital space, but also without any of the monitoring or considerations that parents would normally give to a young person, because they're at home, they're safe. But it's entirely possible now that your young person would be safer with their mates after school hanging out at the beach than they would be at home alone with an iPad in their bedroom. It's just the way that the world is right now. So, being able to look at the context that your young person is walking through with an adult brain incredibly helpful. One, to understand why it is that they're doing what they're doing, but also how you can assist them. One of the most challenging things that I've found as a new parent, but my wife's an early childhood teacher, so this has been drilled into me, is that the goal of parenting should never be to raise safe children. The goal of parenting should be to raise resilient children. Because at some point, at some stage, they've got to go out and do life by themselves. And for some reason, at no other point in our child's development do we think it's okay just to deep end them. With swimming, we've never just thrown them in and gone, see you in half an hour? No, we've gone into the shallows with them, we've walked them into a place where they feel uncomfortable, we've stood beside them until they've reached that point of comfort, and then we've let them go a little bit deeper until eventually we don't actually need to be standing beside them. We can trust them that they're going to be sensible enough and safe enough within their own abilities. And this is something that we've got to do with technology, often when our young people are more capable than we are. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at some of the things that our young people have to deal with. And the first one is screen time. Now, this isn't a new problem. Not really. I reckon every single one of us at some point will have had our parents tell us, don't sit so close to the TV, you'll get square eyes. We never did, but what I do find interesting today is that we have far more screen time than we've ever had before. The good news is that the screens that we are watching are far better for us than the screens that we had. I remember one night my father, he had a friend come over and they had just bought a video game, Tomb Raider, fantastic. They spent 8 hours that night playing the game, and I saw my father in the morning and he had burst a blood vessel in his eye. Just because he had been focusing at the screen all night. That doesn't really happen too much anymore because the screens that we're looking at, they're far better quality, they're far a better definition, they're a lot healthier for us. However, the issue when it comes to screen time is that when we were watching TV, back in the day, you'd watch that episode of Friends or whatever it was for 45 minutes, maybe an hour with ad breaks, and then it would end and you'd have to wait 24 hours to watch it again, or you'd have to wait a whole week. We don't have natural stopping points anymore, because we have Netflix and you can watch 6 episodes before Netflix asks a little bit patronisingly, are you still here? To which the answer is, yes I am, keep watching. And because we don't have these natural stopping points, it's really easy for, not only for our young people to develop bad habits when it comes to technology, but also for us to spend far too much time in front of it. And so what we would recommend is that you start instituting some family values. You start instituting an agreement that you can put in place with your family. We would recommend no TV before school. It's a fantastic time to spend time with family, make sure that all the homework's done, make sure that everyone's ready. We'd also really recommend no screen time at the dinner table. The dinner table is a place for family, and it's also really, you want to try and find places where it makes sense not to have the screen. And the dinner time, because that's family time, it's a really, really easy thing to push because it makes sense. Everyone's sitting at the table eating dinner. Because of the stimulation of screens, most screens have what's called blue light. As the base component for what actually shines in your face. It's kind of like when you're driving at night and you've got some cars that have a yellow headlight and some cars that have the white, bright ones, and you kind of squint. And the blue light that comes off of our phones, it actually doesn't matter what brightness you've got your phone at, by the way, as well. But for our phones, for our TVs, for our laptops, it's brighter than natural light. And so it automatically wakes up your brain, which is why we can scroll for hours and not realise that we're sleeping until we close our phone, we close our eyes, and we can still see the screen burnt into our irises. And it's really hard to go to sleep once you've been staring at your phone for long enough because your brain's actually been woken up. So we'd actually recommend the recommended healthy like time for brain to calm down all the way is about an hour and a half before sleep. Having screens off, not going to lie, quite difficult to achieve. But if you can get a solid half an hour, it's going to make a massive difference. But a lot of the stuff I'm going to suggest today, it seems real obvious, but also quite difficult because potentially a lot of the habits that we're going to try and address are stuff that are already not necessarily in the healthiest of spaces. But family culture and what you deem as appropriate it is really important in your family. A great way to look at it is, so I grew up in a household where I'm an only child, solo dad. I grew up in a bachelor pad. We ate our food in front of the TV every night. And when I got married, I married quite a conservative Christian family, and all of a sudden it was quite a large family as well. And my wife, she has only ever eaten dinner at the table. So when we got married, we had to ask the question, where are we going to eat dinner? So of course, we eat it at the table. But that is now all that my boys will ever know. My boys will grow up in a household where they've only ever eaten dinner at the dinner table. We've only ever sat around and talked about our day. And that means that when they end up being in relationships and they start their own families, that is then something which they are going to deem as normal and potentially bring in. So, setting a precedent, setting something that you agree is something that you're going to do as a family, it is really powerful. It does mean a lot, but you have to be willing to stick to it as well. And I know that your screen time is far more important than you young persons, but research shows that for every moment that you look at your kids and you think, man, I wish you were off your device, odds are they're probably looking at you thinking the exact same thing. And you can't expect your young people to not have any screen time if you're constantly checking your phone or replying to emails. We need to be consistent. I didn't mention before, my goal is to finish us off at 10:02, so 50 minutes, and leave 10 minutes for questions at the end. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask, but that means that people that need to go home to their families, they can do that on time. Social media, this is probably the big bad at the moment. This is a thing which is constantly being reinforced to us as something which is negative, and not gonna lie, kind of hard to argue with a lot of the stuff which is coming out at the moment. However, social media currently, it forms actually an integral part of the way that your young person identifies and expresses themselves and communicates with their world. If you have a look at the top downloaded apps on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, almost every single one of them will be a social media app. Our young people are no longer on their phones playing games mindlessly. Most of the time, even though it might seem like it's mindless, they're actually using something which connects them with the people and the communities that they are part of. Real quick discussion about some of the most common social media apps. Who here has a Facebook account, by the way? Okay, so currently, young people have fled Facebook for Instagram and for TikTok. Quick show of hands, who here has a Facebook account? That's why. Young people have left because you are on there, and there is nothing more uncool than having them post something and having mum go thumbs up in the comments. So, look, one of the things which has happened is that, again, we're a little bit behind the ball, which means we don't understand what it is or why it is that our young people are using these things. However, you can quite sensibly use Facebook, I'm assuming, without running into anything particularly nasty. And odds are your young people, they can do the exact same thing. The companies that run these programs, they are desperate to not have your young person encounter something awful. It's the only way that they're able to function is to try and block that stuff. However, the problem is if your young person does end up encountering something, and most of the time it's shocking, it's unbelievable, they've got to watch it a couple of times to try and wrap their head around it, and then that algorithm reinforces, oh, this is something that this person likes, and then the likelihood of them encountering that thing is increased. Again, social media companies, they try their hardest to remove this content. A really good example, I think that Facebook got a lot of slack, after the mosque shootings. We started as a nation, the Christchurch Appeal, which is to try and get social media companies on board with violence and terrorism and trying to make that whole thing far more accessible to being able to take down that content. However, at the height of that content being shared on Facebook, and to be honest, a lot of people in this room probably have glimpsed moments of that footage. It wasn't hard to find, but it was being shared hundreds of thousands of times a second. So being able to stop that, being able to stop a traumatic event that's happening in real time is incredibly difficult. So even if your young person is the most sensible, even if you're completely on board with everything that they are doing, there is always going to be an element of risk, and you can't remove that risk. That being said, almost all social media apps, they have an age restriction. Does anyone know what that age restriction is? 13, yeah. Now, I don't know if you think your young person doesn't have a social media account, but from my experience going to schools, we ask how many of you have a social media account. It would be a solid 70 to 80%. We'll ask how many of you have an account that your parents aren't aware of. Probably another 20% of students put their hands up. Look, if you can set about a standard again in your family where you honour age restrictions, it's a really, really good thing to focus on because, look, it's not that big a deal, your young person breaking an R13. Not really, it's R13. However, the next age restriction is R18, and if they've got it in their mind that age restrictions don't apply to them, then the next barrier leads to some pretty full-on stuff. And potentially, well, not potentially, we want to shelter them from that. I will open the R18 door in a minute. Okay, so Instagram. Instagram is by far currently still the most used social media app. However, as far as your young people, most of them will not be using it as actively anymore. However, the way that they use Instagram and these social media apps is really fascinating. It's almost beautiful, which might sound like a weird thing to say, but most young people, they will have multiple social media profiles. They'll have a profile which is public because young people realize that what they see online isn't a real reflection of what life is like. They know that. And so they will have a profile which is curated meticulously to show how amazing their life is, and then they can show that alongside all of their other friends' amazing lives so that everyone can say, look how awesome I am. They'll also have another account, which is a private account. It'll have their very small circle of friends, and that'll be the account where they share the raw, ugly, real stuff which is going on in their world. There'll be a lot of tears. There'll be probably a lot of gossip. It's a place for them to actually chat with the people that they are closest to. Snapchat, an app which was really popular a couple of years ago, is almost exclusively used for this. It is a way to talk to the people in your immediate circle. But again, being able to look at the products that these young people are using with your fully developed brain, you potentially begin to highlight some stuff that are issues. The biggest being that with a small group of people and no outward oversight because it's private, it's really easy for content to spiral, to become inappropriate quickly, for your young person to be kind of sucked into this vortex of negativity or pain, and then your teachers have got to deal with it on a Monday. It's really easy for stuff to be passed around, which isn't always great as well. My bit of advice would be when it comes to Instagram, one of the best things, actually my bit of advice when it comes to all social media, is find out what your young person is using and download it. Become familiar with it. You don't have to become Insta famous, but understanding how it is that your young person uses this content is really important because you can then look at what they're doing with your fully developed brain. My old CEO, he has 5 boys, and they've got 2 years apart, every single one of them. And it got to a point where 4 of his oldest sons all had social media, and the youngest son, he was 12, he desperately wanted to use social media. All of his siblings did, and his dad had to be like, no. And it became this ongoing war, it became this battle. And so rather than just saying no and creating more conflicts, he decided that he would try and come out in front of the situation. And he said, yep, we can get you an Instagram account. However, it is going to be our family Instagram account. It's not yours, it's the family's. You can only post something if everyone agrees to post it. You're not allowed to change the passwords. You're not allowed to create another account. We can check it at any time because it's our account. And that meant that their youngest boy was able to be part of what it was that his friends were doing, part of what his family was doing. He still managed to be creative. He still managed to post things. But he was introduced to this at a speed at which his parents thought was appropriate. It was the family account. And that meant if he did something dumb, it could be taken off him. It wasn't his own personal thing. It was the family's. On that note, conventional wisdom would say that you should get your young person to do some chores and clean the car and mow the lawns until they've got enough money that they can buy their own phone. I really recommend that you don't do that. I'd really recommend that you buy a phone for your young person and you let them know this is a privilege that you get to have. It's not a right, it's not something that you've earned. I'm an amazing parent, loves me. And then, if they do something dumb, you're not taking away their property. You're saying, hold on, we're going to pump the brakes on this privilege until you can prove again that you've earned it. Again, it's a little bit more righteous. Your young person has less to complain about because you're not stealing something that's theirs. And the same is true for social media accounts. If you're understanding what they're using, if you've given them permission to use it, hey, I'll let you use this if I'm allowed to go and check your account at any time. I'm not saying that I'm going to. I'm probably not going to. However, if I want to check it, you let me see. If you don't, I'm taking it off. Creating this framework is way more helpful for you because, again, you have justification to check stuff. The most common social media app that all of our young people are using is TikTok. It's incredibly popular because it's really, really easy to have your content seen. The way that the algorithm works is that people find niches and then that content is shared really quickly between people that are interested in similar things. And so odds are, if your young person has a TikTok account, it's not uncommon for them to be having their content viewed by thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, which is a massive buzz for them because they feel like they're being successful, like they've created something amazing. But again, with your fully adult brain, you've realised potentially quite risky. I think that there are some positives to TikTok. I can't think of anything in my entire life that has happened since TikTok, before TikTok, where I've seen hundreds of young people in groups, dancing in public, being creative together. It is a force of creativity. However, again, the way that the algorithm works is if your young person sees something, which isn't great, the likelihood of them being able to see that again is increased. A big concern at the moment in the international community, you may have heard of him, it's a bloke called Andrew Tate. He's a raging misogynist. And most of the content that he creates, most young people look at and they think, that's hilarious. This is the worst relationship advice I've ever heard in my life. No one would take that seriously. But then, if that content continues to play, all of a sudden this thing which they thought was ridiculous and thought was stupid and thought was silly begins to be something which is still ridiculous and stupid and silly, but is also normal. And that's what's become dangerous with that content. What's become dangerous with most negative social media content isn't that it's necessarily something which is taken seriously, but it's something which is normalised. And that's because the algorithm wants to keep people there. So, again, my suggestion would be to find out what your young person is using, use it alongside them, again, sit down and ask them, hey, how do I create an Instagram account? Show me how you use your TikTok. They will love the opportunity to be an expert and to fill you in on the way that they use these things. You'll probably be able to actually see how capable they are using this content. Ask them, how do I create a private profile? How can I message you? How can I receive messages or check messages? They'll be able to show you all of that stuff really, really capably. But again, you get to filter your adult brain. My suggestion as well would also be to look at what it is that they are watching. Generally speaking, young people, they are creator loyal rather than like an overarching theme. They'll have a couple of people that they watch again and again and again, and so you'll get a pretty good idea pretty quick what the content is that they see most of the time if you look at the creators that they are watching. Sweet social media. I'll let you take a quick photo of this. This is developed by NetSafe. It's an amazing program and company here in New Zealand. But it's just some questions that you can ask your young people about Instagram. To be fair, a lot of this stuff is pretty applicable to most social media. But again, if you ask your young people this stuff, a lot of the time they are fully aware of the negative stuff. They're fully aware of the dangers, but in the moment, that's when they don't see it. Sweet. Before we move on, look, I will open up the R18 door. I don't have a slide for that, thank God. We have some pretty awful stats in New Zealand when it comes to adult content. So the Youth 2000 survey, which came out at the very end of 2019, it was very thorough. It was potentially some of the best research globally around this content. And it's found that in New Zealand, 70% of young people have been exposed to some form of pornographic imagery before the age of 12. So most of your kids. Again, a great frustration, sometimes, for the teachers, particularly when it comes to the junior levels, year 7 and 8, is that their curriculum doesn't actually allow for them to have a lot of the conversations that they kind of wish that they could have. Most of these health talks, they happen year 9, definitely year 10. However, by the time your young person reaches year 10, almost 93% of young people have been exposed to some form of adult imagery. The research shows that almost always it's by accident. And almost always, the young person that sees this content, they are confused, some of them are terrified, they really have no idea what they're seeing and they want to talk to someone about it. And what most men end up doing is they end up going to their parents, saying, hey, I saw something, or hey, I don't know how to, or they get caught by their parents, and the parents' natural reaction is to take away their phone. It's to take away access to the internet. And again, I can understand why that's the natural reaction. We want to keep our kids safe. However, that reinforces an idea that if your young person needs to talk to you about something, and it's not their fault, you're going to punch them. Which means next time they encounter something which is scary or uncomfortable, the odds of them talking to you are dramatically reduced. It's actually, while it's uncomfortable and it's scary, and I know it is because it's my job full time, it's actually a really, really amazing moment for you to be courageous as parents and have a conversation that is uncomfortable and say, hey, how did that make you feel seeing that? Again, most of the research says that most young people, they really, really aren't fond of porn. That sounds crazy, but research says, and it's funny, it changes every single year level, but almost every single age group of people ask the question, do you think you saw porn too young? The answer is yes. And the question is, do you think porn should be made illegal? Almost all young people say yes. It's the adults that don't want it to be. And interestingly enough, when they ask young people, hey, at what age do you think it's inappropriate for young people to be looking at porn? It's almost always the year directly younger than them. So they're all good, but the age range below, no, not good. And that increases every year level. It's something which is incredibly destructive, and we see it time and time again. It's actually really, really skewed the relationship stats in New Zealand. Teen pregnancies, right down. STIs in teens, right down. Unprotected sex, right down. Just underage sex, right down. But that's because almost entirely because young people no longer have to search for real sexual gratification. They can receive it at home. And so they don't need to go out. They don't need to get into a relationship. They don't need to pursue that part of their life just yet. And it reinforces some ideas about sex and relationships at a very young age that are also just really unhelpful. It's an opportunity for us to have resilient kids rather than safe kids, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And again, being able to shut that door once it's been opened, really hard, because the way that our brains work, even if it was shocking to begin with, still have questions, still kind of want to find out because it was a little bit exciting. But if it's an ongoing conversation and you set a standard, even if it's something which has been scary for a young person, it can actually be a really positive result. But it just requires that you're there to make it positive. Sweet, all right. Back to our regular viewing. So, I'm going to quickly cover gaming. Quick show of hands, does anyone here have children that end up gaming quite a bit? Bunching, sweet. So gaming is an interesting thing. Personally, I am a gamer. I've grown up gaming. I gamed with my dad. I remember when I was 13 years old, the only present that we got for Christmas was we got an Xbox with multiple games and a couple of different controllers, and then that whole Christmas day, we just sat and we played Xbox, and it was, and still is, an amazing memory. Both of my boys, they were very consistent, and when they were about 0 to 8 months old, that they would wake up at 4:30 on the dot every single morning, and so I would get them a bottle, I would sit on the couch, and I would play PlayStation. The reason that gaming is so successful and it's so popular is because it's fun. The truth is, it is fun, it's entertaining, and also, you can make a living out of it now. Something that you couldn't do 10 years ago. The amount of people that now say that their dream job would be to be a streamer or for them to be a YouTube creator, it's now massive, and it's partially viable. That's the thing. There's no limit to people's access to this technology which can enable them to be a streamer or for them to be a content creator on YouTube. The problem is, because there's so many people interested in it, it's incredibly competitive, and so the likelihood of them being successful, not that high. When it comes to gaming, the biggest battle will always be that because it's fun, your young person won't want to stop. And trying to get your young person off the gaming platforms is really difficult. What you need to be able to do is understand what it is that you're playing. Again, understanding the content that they're using so that you can actually apply your adult brain to it is incredibly important. So, one of the big games not so long ago was a game called Fortnite. Most of you will have heard of it. It's a 100-player battle royale, very cartoony graphics, where you drop into a map from a flying bus. Fantastic. And then in teams of 1 or 3 or 4 or however many people, you shoot each other until there's one team left. It's incredibly competitive. They had the Fortnite World Champs for the first time 4 years ago. A 13-year-old boy won $6 million. Not a bad haul. But also, it was the first time that they had trialled a world championship where the opening heats to work out who would make it to the finals were available to everyone. Literally, your young person could have started to compete in your lounge. And so they had the Oceania region, they had America, they had Asia, they had all these different regions, and then those people would progress on to the next region, and then the next region, until eventually they were in a real sports stadium in the States with thousands of people watching them, and it was a really big deal. Fortnite is a great example of a game where we apply logic, but it doesn't work because the game doesn't work the way we think it does. For lots of parents, they'll say, all right, you can get off in 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then 2 minutes, and then 1 minute. The thing is, Fortnite, it doesn't work with a time limit, it works in rounds. So, if your child is really, really good, and most of them aren't, the round will last for 20 minutes. Odds are, they're probably trash, and it'll last for 3 minutes, and they'll die, and they'll start to play again. But the longer you're in that game, the more adrenaline your young person is feeling. They are peaking, they've got dopamine coursing through their brain, because the longer they're in the game, the more successful they are, the less people there are alive, the closer they are to winning. And if you walk in at that moment and say, can you pause this? They will explode. You cannot pause online games. Please don't ask them to. It will be something that drives them wild. But also, they are basically experiencing a similar emotion to what it would have felt like if, as a 6-year-old, you asked them to finish up at the playground with their mates and come home. They're gutted, they're disappointed, they've been having fun, most of the time they're playing with their friends, and all of a sudden you're asking them to leave and they're heartbroken. So, understanding what they use so that you can say, hey, 3 rounds, and then you're going to come off. And odds are it's going to be less time than 20 minutes. 2 rounds, and then you come off. Last round, and then you come off. And to be fair, it's still going to be hard to get them off the platform because it's something that's fun. But the challenge becomes, how can you make the rest of your child's time entertaining? Again, my boss with the 5 boys, he decided that he would do everything he could to make sure that his young boys do not spend all their time in front of the TV. So they parked the cars out on the street, they bought a pool table, put it in the garage, set them out there. They instituted a rule that every Saturday morning, they had taken the Wi-Fi modem, put it in the car, so there was no internet until they had done a list of chores, and then that Wi-Fi came back again and they could watch some TV or they could play a game. It worked really well. They have the cleanest house I've ever seen in my life. But it means that they weren't able to use Wi-Fi as well. Again, if you're going to try and institute a rule, you need to take the hit as well. So understanding what it is that your young person's using is really important. I will say this, and this might sound a little bit old school, but I'm going to, because we're running out of time. There was a massive surge of the term gaming addiction a couple of years ago. Fortnite was something that spurred this concept There were stories of young people that were sitting in front of the TV playing this game non-stop for 24 hours. They'd soiled themselves, they hadn't got up and gotten food. There were people that were going to school only to turn around and walk back home again and start playing all day while their parents were there at school. And at the end of the day, lots of people were like, gaming addiction, these games are awful, when really, it's just crap parenting. At the end of the day, as much as it's important that you are alongside your kids, you're not their friends. You're their parents. And you are allowed to say, no, that's enough. You're allowed to say, too bad, you've had enough. At the end of the day, the buck does stop with you. And you are allowed to put your foot down with all the kicking and screaming that they do and say, nah, this is too much. You're always going to be far more effective putting your foot down if there's been a clear course of actions to that point. So they understand how they got here, they understand what they could have done to avoid it, and how they can fix the problem. But at the end of the day, you are parents. And look, I said I was going to finish now, but let me finish on one last thing, which is keeping your young people safe. Generally speaking, there are 3 different things that you can use to keep your young person safe. The first one is software. This is what we would recommend. This is Outcapt. This is an app that you can download on your computer or on your phone. It's something that filters through content. I think it costs $2 a month per device. $2 a month per device. It's really good at creating sneaky kids. Your young people will be able to work a way around this stuff, 100%. But again, it sets a precedent, it sets a culture of this is and isn't acceptable. If your young person has an iPhone, the adult settings on an iPhone are actually top notch. And assuming that you've got kind of like the password, that you can set that stuff and your young person doesn't know, it's actually going to keep them pretty safe. What is better than software is hardware. This is a company from New Zealand, Safe Surfer. This is something that you plug into your modem and it does all of the filtering before it gets to your device, which means it doesn't slow down your device. It's far more effective. It's a little bit more expensive, but we would really recommend it. It's developed by some Kiwi dads that were concerned about what their young boys were growing up with, and they were like, let's make sure we can try and provide some safety. Again, your young person will find a way to get around this stuff. Just like I'm sure some of you found a way to sneak out at night or to avoid going home in the weekend and spend time with your friends. Part of it is just about growing up. But again, setting a standard of this is or isn't appropriate is really, really important. And it's important because the third thing, which is the most important thing you can do with your young person, is be involved, which is why it's so reassuring that you're here tonight. The Youth 2012 survey, it showed that nearly 40% of young people wanted to spend more time with at least one of their parents. A study carried out in America involving 12,000 teenagers found that adults have a powerful effect on their child's behaviour right through the high school years. Research has shown consistently, that the number one largest indicator of how successful your young person is going to be in every metric of their life is if they have at least one older person who cares about them, is invested in them, and wants them to succeed. Before your young person does something horrendously stupid, 9 times out of 10, the reason that they don't is because there's a little voice in their head that says, oh, mum wouldn't like that. Oh, dad wouldn't approve. The things that you say and that you speak out and that you do for your children, while it doesn't necessarily feel like it sticks at the moment, because your young people are going through puberty, as soon as their brain finishes developing, your little angel will return to you. They'll be smarter, they'll be wiser, and the stuff that you've been telling them over the years, it doesn't like fall off like water off a duck's back. It does get stored in there somewhere, so eventually end up coming back out again and making them fantastic, well-rounded human beings. It's going to be a couple of years though. The thing that they need is to make sure that through those couple of years, you are there for them. Again, I get to speak from the top of New Zealand all the way down to the bottom. I get to speak at tiny little country schools where you've got 14 kids from year 9 all the way to year 13. Very strange. I speak at the largest schools in the country, Decile 1 all the way to Decile 10. And I've got to say that the parents that take time out to invest into their young people, whether it's something like this, or it's sport, or it's some form of recreation, the amount of parents that for the first time in years went for walks with their kids over COVID and it created this amazing bond with young people, amazing. Being able to invest into a young person without having a screen in front of you is one of the best things that you can do and your young people that really do value it. I had a parent who came and talked to me after one of these talks, and she was like, I was thinking about it, every year we go on holiday, and we go to our family batch where there's no cell phone reception. And so they can't use their phones, it's immensely frustrating for them, but so we lock them in the car. And they hate it for 2 days. And after 48 hours, they're starting to play Monopoly, and they're going fishing, and they're amazing kids, and they're respectful, and they talk to us, and we read books. But then as soon as the phones come back out again, they become moody and aggressive and frustrated. And I just asked her the question, I was like, when they have their phones back, do you also have your phone back? And she was like, yeah, I do. And we can't just say they're frustrated because they have their phones. It's also entirely possible that they're frustrated, that they deeply, deeply desire to have a greater connection with you. And it's one of the biggest things that stops them, is the devices that we've got in our pockets. Guys, that is the end of this presentation. But I do really want to shout out these guys. Up until very recently, we've worked very closely with the parenting place. If you find yourself in a situation where you've got some stuff that you don't know how to overcome, you don't know how to battle against it, if your situation is quite specific, these guys are fantastic people to talk to. They love your young people. I know because Attitude was part of the parenting pace for 24 years. We went out on our own in the last year of COVID. Woo! Bad business decision. But also, if you want to have some family counselling, if you want just to have some ideas about programs in your area, they're fantastic. They've also got a bunch of resources. I'd really recommend this one right here. Oh, is it going to change? The Big Weekend. It's free, it's on Spotify. They're strapped in, they can't escape you. But again, hey, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's been an honour and a privilege. I hope that you've come away with something. If you need to go, then please return to your families. However, if you have questions, now's the time to ask them. No pressure. And also, if it's uncomfortable, I'll chill out here afterwards, and you can come and have a chat with me one-on-one as well, if that's easier. But yes?
Is there like a recommended amount of time that a kid at year 7 should be looking at a screen?
So, generally speaking, a lot of the time we consider screen time to almost be like cigarettes. Like the more screen time you have, the worse that it is. But I actually think that probably a more appropriate way to look at it would be like a diet. Having a little bit of it daily, great. Having a lot of it sometimes daily, great. We have young people that are more conscientious about the world, about equality, about the environment than we've ever had before because of the screens. However, if that's the only thing in their diet, then it's really bad. I think that potentially the biggest issue is not necessarily how much time they spend on it, it's how much time consistently they spend on it. So like WorkSafe would suggest that if you spend an hour on your computer, that it's really important for you to get up, stretch, walk around the office for 5 minutes. It's probably actually not a bad thing to do for them as well. If they've watched an episode of something on Netflix, get up, run around the lawn, do some homework, find some way to naturally break it up, and if they end up going back again, once they've completed that task, it's not the end of the world. I think the biggest thing is the consistent use. And so if you can institute those natural stopping points, regardless of what's going on, so they're going to not be on their device at the dinner table, and then they jump on the TV immediately after you've finished dinner, but you've got the agreement that half an hour before bed that's going to go off. Potentially that's only going to be an hour, 2, you're probably going to be sitting there with them as well. It's actually an opportunity for family. We've created, and our family, we've created reasons to use technology rather than reasons not to. So with our first child, we said, no technology for the first 1,000 days, no screens. We were really good until we had our second kid, and then those rules went out the window. But so we now have a Friday movie night. Because that's what we used to have when we were kids. You'd grab some biscuits and you'd fill up your cup of tea when the ad breaks were on. And so now we have Friday movie night, and we don't even care if it's been a long day, and we order takeaways and we let them watch TV until we have the movie, but we sit down with dinner on the floor, we watch a movie. But because we have Friday movie night, if our boys want to watch something on Thursday, we can say, no, it's not Friday. So creating reasons rather than reasons not to, I think is really important. yeah, potentially I answered your question and a bunch of others that weren't asked. But any other questions? Great. Well. Look, again, if you've got any questions, please feel free to come up and chat with me. But go home, return to your families, drive safe. It's wild weather around here. And who knows, we might see you in the next couple of years. But again, thank you very much. On behalf of me and the team here, it's so great to see you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe. And love you kids. Cheers, guys.